The morning sun meant nothing in the Whitmore mansion. It was just a cold light on a cold life, illuminating the dust dancing over a rug worth more than a man's life. My name was Eleanor Whitmore, and I was sitting at my vanity, feeling the pins go into my scalp one by one, each one a nail in the coffin of my freedom. In the mirror, my mother hovered, her fingers adjusting a pearl necklace that felt like a slave's collar. "Remember, Eleanor," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Cornelius Ashford will be calling. You must be charming." She didn't say I had to be happy. She didn't say I had to be safe. Just charming. Because Mr. Ashford was 30 years my senior, with eyes like a dead fish and breath that smelled of the grave. And my father, well, my father had a fondness for cards he couldn't win. So I was the price, the currency to settle a debt, a pretty charming piece of property to be sold to the highest bidder. "Yes, mother," I whispered. In my lap, my fingers tore a lace handkerchief to shreds. Every room in that house was a cage, a gilded, suffocating cage. After my mother left, my younger sister Charlotte slipped in. She was the only soul in that house who saw me as a person. She handed me a folded newspaper, a forbidden thing in our home. "I thought you might find the advertisements amusing," she whispered. I skimmed past the news of the world, a world I wasn't allowed to be part of. And then I saw it, tucked away in the back pages, a few lines of simple text that screamed louder than anything on the front page. "Respectable rancher seeks bride. Man of 28 years, owner of 500 acres in Montana Territory, seeks honest woman of good character for matrimony. Must be willing to work hard and embrace frontier life. No fortune required, only a genuine heart." I read it once, twice, 3 times. Montana, a place I'd only seen in drawings, a place with a sky so big it could swallow Boston whole, a place where a person could breathe. This man, this James Mackenzie, he didn't want a fortune. He wanted a genuine heart. Mine was locked away, but maybe, just maybe, I could find the key. "You can't be serious," Charlotte breathed, reading over my shoulder. "Why not?" I asked, looking from the ad to my own reflection. I saw the fear in my eyes, but beneath it, something else was taking root. A desperate, wild hope. Cornelius Ashford's face swam in my mind, his clammy hands, his possessive smile. "Is the devil you don't know not sometimes better than the one you do?" The breaking point came a week later. Cornelius cornered me in the conservatory. He pressed his damp body against mine, his hand heavy on my waist, whispering about how young brides needed a firm hand. A guiding hand. The look in his eyes wasn't guidance, it was predation. That night I made my choice. I wrote a letter to a stranger in Montana. I signed it Miss E. White, close enough to the truth, far enough from the cage. I didn't mention money or society. I wrote of a desire for honest work and a simple life. I was offering the only thing I had left to give, myself. 3 weeks later, a reply came. The handwriting was bold, the words direct. "Life here is not easy, but it is honest. I offer no luxury, but I promise respect and partnership. If you are certain, I will send funds for passage. The choice is yours. The choice is yours." No one had ever said those words to me before. That night, while the great house slept, I packed a single bag. I left a note on my pillow that said everything and nothing. Charlotte met me at the servants' entrance, pressing her savings into my hand, her face a mess of tears. "Write to me," she whispered. "Promise me you'll write." I promised. Then I slipped into the pre-dawn darkness and ran toward the train station, every shadow a phantom sent to drag me back. As the train pulled away from Boston, I didn't cry. I pressed my face to the glass and watched my old life, my gilded cage, disappear into the morning mist. I was no longer Eleanor Whitmore. I was a ghost, heading west toward a man I'd never met and a life I couldn't imagine. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The journey west was like descending into another world. The plush, velvet seats of the Eastern lines gave way to hard wooden benches. The passengers changed from perfumed ladies to weathered farmers and miners with dirt under their nails. My fine dress, even my plainest one, drew stares. In Omaha, I sold a small locket Charlotte had given me and bought 2 simple calico dresses and a pair of sturdy boots. I became someone new with every mile. The world outside the window flattened, then swelled into rolling hills. Then on the horizon, mountains clawed at a sky bigger than any I had ever seen. There was so much space, so much emptiness. It was terrifying, and it was beautiful. Fellow travelers told stories, tales of blizzards that buried homes, of droughts that cracked the earth, of men driven mad by the sheer, crushing loneliness of the plains. A woman with hollow eyes told me how she'd lost her husband and two children to winter fever in the Dakota Territory. With every story, a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. What had I done? But then I would remember Cornelius Ashford's dead eyes, and I knew I'd rather face a blizzard than his bed. The train finally shuddered to a halt in Miles City, Montana. It was less a town and more a collection of wooden shacks sinking into a sea of mud. The air smelled of dust, horses, and something wild. I stood on the platform, clutching my single bag, trying not to look as lost as I felt. "You must be Miss White." The voice was low and steady. I turned. He was taller than I'd imagined, with shoulders that filled the doorframe of the station. His skin was weathered by the sun, his eyes the color of a winter sky. He was handsome, but his expression was closed, guarded, stern. "Mr. Mackenzie," I managed. He just nodded, his cool eyes taking in my too clean dress, my soft hands. I saw his jaw tighten. This wasn't the warm man from the letters. This was someone else entirely. "We'll be married today," he said. No preamble, no greeting. "Judge travels through once a month. Can't wait for the next one." I blinked. Married, today, to this complete stranger. Yes, of course. A flicker of surprise in his eyes. Maybe he expected me to argue. He picked up my bag as if it weighed nothing. "This way." He walked, and I hurried to keep up, my new boots slipping in the mud. This wasn't a courtship. This was a transaction. The courthouse was a dusty room that smelled of stale paper. The judge mumbled the words. Two clerks served as witnesses without even looking up from their ledgers. "Do you take this woman?" "I do," James Mackenzie said. "Do you take this man?" I hesitated. The weight of it, the sheer madness of it, crashed down on me. I was thousands of miles from everything I knew, marrying a man whose face I'd seen for less than 10 minutes. Then I thought of Cornelius, of the cage. "I do," I said, my voice a whisper. He slid a simple gold band on my finger. No diamonds, no ceremony, just a plain ring and a firm handshake from the judge. Just like that, I was no longer Miss White, the runaway. I was Mrs. James Mackenzie, and I had no idea what that meant. Outside, he helped me onto a wagon seat. "It's a full day's ride to the ranch," he said, climbing up beside me. "We'll stop at Henderson's trading post for supplies." As the wagon rolled out of the muddy town, the last traces of civilization vanished behind us. There was nothing but endless grass and that impossibly vast sky. The man beside me was a stranger, my husband. He drove in silence, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. There was a wall around him, a fortress of quiet I couldn't see past. The wedding ring on my finger felt impossibly heavy. I had made my choice. Now I had to live with it, whatever the consequences. The wagon stopped outside a long, low building with a sign that read, Henderson's Trading Post. My bones ached from the ride, but I kept my mouth shut. I would not appear weak. "Wait here," James said, his voice flat. I watched him go inside. A group of rough-looking men on the porch stopped talking and stared at me. Their eyes were hungry, insolent. "Well, well," one of them drawled, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Looks like Mackenzie got himself a mail-order bride." Another one chuckled. "Pretty little thing. Bet she don't last the winter. Them eastern flowers wilt fast out here." Heat rose in my cheeks, but I kept my gaze fixed on the horizon, just as James did. I had fled one kind of prison only to find another, where every man felt he had the right to judge me. James came back out, his jaw tight. He loaded sacks of flour, beans, and ammunition into the wagon, ignoring the men, but their stares were like insects crawling on my skin. "Congratulations on the wedding, Mackenzie," the first man said, his tone thick with mockery. James just gave a curt nod. "Ma'am needs some supplies," he said to me. He pressed a few coins into my hand. Get what you need. Practical things. Inside, the store was a jumble of everything from plow blades to penny candy. A stout woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile approached. You're the new Mrs. Mackenzie, she said. It wasn't a question. Came from Boston, I hear. Long way from home. She helped me pick out wool stockings and a bonnet, all the while studying me. At the counter, I saw the men from the porch had come inside. Their whispers were loud enough to hear. Mackenzie must be desperate, advertising for a bride. After what happened with Mary, can you blame him? Shh, he'll hear you. Mary, the name hit me like a stone. Another secret my new husband was keeping. The rest of the journey was silent. The land rolled on, beautiful and empty. As the sun began to set, James finally spoke. Ranch is just over that rise. I leaned forward, my heart a mix of hope and dread. We crested the hill, and my hope died. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't even a proper house. It was a modest log cabin, a tired-looking barn, and a few outbuildings scattered in a dusty yard. It was neat, but it was so small, so isolated. The emptiness I had found beautiful now seemed threatening. It ain't much, Warana's, James said, a defensive edge in his voice. But it's mine. As we pulled into the yard, 3 people appeared. An older man with a limp, a young Mexican boy, and a middle-aged woman with a stern face who wiped flour-dusted hands on her apron. That's Hank, my foreman, James said. The boy is Miguel, and that's Mrs. Novak, the housekeeper. They gathered around the wagon as James helped me down. I could feel them taking my measure. My dress too fine, my hands too soft. Mrs. Novak's eyes in particular were filled with a deep, unwavering skepticism. This is Eleanor, James said. My wife. The word still sounded foreign. Mrs. Novak stepped forward. Welcome, Mrs. Mackenzie, she said, her accent thick. You must be tired. James carried my bag inside. The cabin was one room, a fireplace, a rough table, a kitchen area, and a ladder leading to a loft. My new home. Mrs. Novak has a cottage out back, James said. Hank and Miguel bunk in the barn. He gestured to the ladder. I'll show you the bedroom. I followed him up. The loft was small and neat. A rope bed, a washstand, a single tiny window looking out at the endless prairie. His clothes were already hanging on pegs. His boots were lined up against the wall. Our bedroom. Panic fluttered in my chest. I'll leave you to settle in, he said. And then he was gone, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I unpacked my few dresses. The silk ball gown I'd foolishly packed looked like something from another planet. A soft knock. It was Mrs. Novak, holding a stack of fresh linens, though the bed was already made. An excuse to inspect the new bride. Thank you, I said. Mrs. Novak, may I ask you something? Her expression immediately shuddered. The men at the trading post mentioned someone named Mary. Her face went blank. It is not my place to speak of such things, she said, her voice cold. You must ask your husband. And then she, too, was gone. Supper was a quiet, strained affair. I felt useless, a porcelain doll in a room full of working hands. I had never cooked a meal in my life. The men talked of cattle and branding, their words a foreign language. When I tried to ask a question, Hank just shook his head. Begging your pardon, ma'am, but that ain't talk for a lady. If this is my home, I want to understand the work, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. James just looked at me with those unreadable eyes. We'll see, was all he said. Later I sat by the fire while James worked on his ledgers. The silence was a living thing, pressing in on me. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I should retire, I said. I'll be up later, he replied without looking up. I climbed the ladder and changed into my nightgown. I lay in the narrow bed, my body rigid, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance. Hours later, I heard him climb the ladder. He moved quietly in the dark. The bed dipped as he settled on the far edge, leaving a chasm of space between us. He made no move toward me. His breathing eventually evened out into sleep. I lay awake for a long, long time, staring into the darkness, wondering if I had escaped one cage only to lock myself in another. The rooster crowed before the sun was even a rumor. I peered out the tiny window and saw James was already in the yard, moving among the cattle with an easy confidence. I hadn't even felt him leave the bed. I dressed and went down the ladder. The housekeeper, Mrs. Novak, was already at the stove. She gave me a curt nod. "Men already eat and go," she said. "I save food for you." I sat at the rough table. The coffee was bitter, the biscuits heavy as stones. Through the window I watched the ranch at work. Everyone had a purpose. Everyone but me. "Mrs. Novak," I said, "will you teach me to cook?" Surprise flickered across her stern face. "You not know cooking?" "I want to learn," I said. "I want to be useful." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes seeming to peel back every layer of my soft Eastern upbringing. "Is hard work," she said, "not for ladies' hands." "My hands will toughen," I replied with more confidence than I felt. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Perhaps. We start with bread." My first attempt was a sticky, glue-like mess. My second was a dry brick. Mrs. Novak corrected me with a firm patience, her worn hands guiding mine. "Hands remember what mind forgets," she said. By noon I had produced something that vaguely resembled a loaf of bread. When the men came in for the midday meal, I placed it on the table with a flicker of pride. Hank chewed on a piece thoughtfully. "Well," he said, "it's bread, sure enough." Miguel choked back a laugh. James said nothing, but I saw him slip his piece to the dog when he thought I wasn't looking. The weeks that followed were a blur of failure. I tried to gather eggs and the rooster attacked me, tearing my skirt. I tried to milk the cow, and she kicked the pail over, spilling precious milk into the dirt. I was a joke, a useless doll my husband had inexplicably acquired. James remained a stranger. We shared a bed, but not a word more than was necessary. At night I would lie beside him, the space between us as vast and cold as the Montana plains. And I would feel a loneliness so profound it physically hurt. One afternoon, I heard horses. 3 women rode into the yard, their divided skirts and easy confidence marking them as true frontier women. "The Bannister sisters," Mrs. Novak told me, from the next ranch over. I greeted them on the porch, feeling clumsy and out of place. They were kind, but their eyes were full of a pitying curiosity. They had heard all about the mail-order bride from Boston, over coffee, which they had to help me make. They talked about ranch life. They gave me advice on my withered garden. "You're watering at the wrong time," the youngest Alice said, "and this soil needs chicken droppings." As they were leaving, the eldest Sarah took me aside. "It's not easy," she said quietly, "but James Mackenzie is a good man, for all his silence. He's just been through a lot. Give him time." I wanted to ask about Mary. I wanted to scream, "What happened here?" But the words wouldn't come. That night, as I lay in the darkness next to my silent husband, I found a sliver of courage. "I know I'm not what you expected," I whispered to the ceiling, "but I am trying." He was quiet for so long, I thought he was asleep. Then his voice came out of the darkness, holding the first hint of genuine curiosity I'd ever heard from him. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you come here?" "I was trapped," I said. "My family was marrying me to a man. A cruel man. I saw your advertisement and I thought, I hoped." Another long silence. Then he said, "And have you found what you hoped for?" I thought of the failures, the loneliness, the crushing work. But I also thought of the vast, beautiful sky, of the small kindness of the Bannister sisters, of the pride I felt holding that lumpy loaf of bread. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. He shifted in the bed. Not closer, but the tension seemed to ease just a fraction. "Fair enough," he said. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The cold came down from the mountains like a wolf. One evening the wind began to howl, and James came in from the barn, his face grim. "Blizzard," he said. "A bad one." For the next 3 days, the world outside our cabin vanished into a screaming wall of white. The snow piled up against the door, and the cold was a physical thing, a beast trying to claw its way inside. James and Hank fought their way to the barn to feed the stock, coming back each time covered in ice, their faces raw from the wind. On the 3rd night, James collapsed by the fire, utterly spent. "Lost 2 calves," he said, his voice hollow. "Couldn't find them in the drifts." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I was beginning to understand that every animal lost was a blow, a piece of our survival chipped away. He looked at me then, really looked at me. For a moment, the wall around him crumbled. "It happens," he said, "but it never gets easier." The storm finally broke, leaving a world of blinding, silent white. As we all worked to dig ourselves out, I noticed a change. The way Hank spoke to me, the way Miguel smiled. Even Mrs. Novak seemed to thaw slightly. I had survived the first test. That evening, as we sat by the fire, James finally spoke of the ghost that haunted our small cabin. "The storm that took Mary," he began, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the flames. "It was like this one." I held my breath. "I was in town for supplies," he said. "Got trapped there for 2 days. When I finally made it back," his voice broke. "She'd tried to get to the barn, to check on the animals. I found her halfway there, frozen. The baby she was carrying, he was gone too." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold as the grave. So that was the tragedy. A woman and her unborn child swallowed by the prairie winter. A husband left with nothing but guilt. "James," I whispered, "it wasn't your fault." He turned on me, his eyes blazing with a pain so raw it was terrifying. "Wasn't it? I brought her here. I promised I'd keep her safe. I left her alone." His voice dropped. "When I saw you tying that rope around your waist during that first squall, getting ready to go out for the horses, all I could see was her." He thought he was going to lose me too. I moved to sit near him, not touching, just closing the distance. "I'm not Mary," I said softly. "I'm learning. You're teaching me." Something in his face shifted. The firelight caught the tears glistening in his eyes. "Yes," he said, "you are." A few days later, riders appeared on the horizon. Not neighbors. These men rode with a purpose that made my blood run cold. "Get inside," James said, his face hardening into a mask. I watched from the window as 5 men rode into our yard. Their leader was the banker from town, Carl Morrison, the man who held the note on our ranch. "Mackenzie," Morrison said, his voice slick with false sympathy. "Heard you lost stock in the storm. I'm afraid I can't extend your loan any further. You've got 2 weeks to pay the $200 you owe, or I take the ranch." $200. It might as well have been 2 million. After Morrison left, James stood by the corral, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I have $40, I said, offering the last of my escape money. He turned on me, his pride a wounded, angry thing. "No, I won't take your money." "You brought me here to be your wife," I countered, my own temper flaring. "Wives share burdens." That night, as we lay in our separate, silent spaces in the bed, I had an idea. "James," I said into the darkness, "the silk dress, the one I brought from Boston, it's worth at least $100. "Eleanor, no," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I won't let you sell the last piece of your old life." "That life is gone," I said, turning to face him. "This is my life now, our life. Let me help you save it." In the darkness, his hand found mine, his calloused fingers wrapped around my own. It was the first time he had ever touched me with simple tenderness. "We'll find another way," he whispered, "but thank you." The next morning, however, there was a new, desperate energy in him. Tom Bannister rode over with news. The Army was buying horses, paying top dollar. We had 3 that might qualify. For the next week, James worked tirelessly, training the horses. I did my part, taking in mending from the fort. Together with Hank and Miguel's savings, we scraped together $160. We were still $40 short. The Army buyer came the next day. He was a hard man who knew horses. He examined our 3 animals with a critical eye. "I'll take 2, he said finally. "The bay and the chestnut. 35 each." $70. We were still short. I saw James's hope crumble. As the soldiers were leading the horses away, I made a decision. I ran to the barn and came back leading Dulcie, the gentle mare James had given me, the one who was in foal. "What about a breeding mare, Captain?" I called out. "Eleanor, no!" James's voice was sharp with pain. I ignored him. "She's from excellent bloodstock," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was breaking. "1 mare now, but 2 horses in the spring." $45, Shorn, the captain said. "Final offer." "Done," I said before James could protest. I didn't watch them lead her away. I couldn't. I felt James's anger and betrayal like a physical blow. How could you? He said, his voice dangerously low. You love that mare. I love this ranch more, I shot back, turning to face him, my own eyes filled with tears. I love what we are building here. I thought you did too. I fled to the cabin before he could see me break completely. An hour later, he came inside. The money lay on the table, enough to pay Morrison. We had won, but it felt like a terrible defeat. He crossed the room and stood before me. Dulcie. She was the first thing I bought after Mary. He stopped, his throat working. Eleanor, you were right. I've been so busy protecting myself from more loss, I couldn't see what I was building. What you were building. He reached out and gently touched my face, his thumb brushing away a tear. I'm sorry, he whispered, for being a coward, for letting fear keep us strangers. We're not strangers, I said. Not anymore. He kissed me then, a real kiss born of shared struggle and sacrifice. It wasn't a solution to all our problems, but it was a promise that we were finally, truly in this together. That night, for the first time, there was no space between us in the bed. We had saved the ranch. Now maybe we could start to save each other. Spring came, and with it, a fragile sense of peace. The ranch began to thrive, and so did the partnership between me and James. The wounds of the past were healing, replaced by a quiet, steady affection. Then one afternoon they came. 5 riders, moving with a dark purpose that made the hair on my arms stand up. Their leader was a man with a scarred face and eyes as cold as a frozen grave. I'm looking for James Mackenzie, he said, his voice a low growl. We have old business. He's not here, I said, standing my ground on the porch, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mrs. Novak had already slipped inside, and I heard the click of the rifle being lifted from the mantel. The man smiled, a chilling, humorless expression. That's a shame, because your husband owes me a debt, a blood debt. He leaned forward in his saddle. You see, my name is Jake Thornton, and Mary was my sister. The world tilted. This man, this dangerous stranger, was Mary's brother. She was my half-sister, Thornton continued, his eyes scanning our ranch with a predatory gaze. The good one. The one who thought she was too good for us once she married your husband, and then he left her to die in a storm. It was an accident, I said, my voice shaking. Was it? He sneered. Or was it a man who didn't care enough to protect his own wife? A man who was already looking for a replacement? Just then, James rode over the rise, Hank and Miguel with him. He saw the men in the yard and his face went pale. He dismounted, his body tense as a coiled spring. Jake, he said, his voice flat, I thought you were in prison. Got out early for good behavior. Thornton laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Came home to find my sister dead and you with a new little wife. Funny how that works. This is between us, Jake, James said, his hand hovering over his gun. Leave her out of it. Like you left Mary out of it, Thornton roared. She wrote to me, you know, in prison. She told me how lonely she was, how this place was killing her. But she stayed because she loved you, you worthless coward. I saw James flinch as if he'd been struck. The air crackled with tension. It was a powder keg, and Thornton was holding the match. This isn't what Mary would have wanted. One of Thornton's own men, a younger boy, pleaded. Shut up, Will, Thornton snapped, but I saw the opening. Your sister sounds like she chose love over violence, I said, my voice clear and steady. Are you going to honor her by becoming the very thing she tried to escape? Thornton's face twisted in agony. She was 8 years old when our father died, he said, his voice suddenly raw with grief. I was supposed to protect her, and I failed. Then she wrote that she'd found you. Someone good, someone who would keep her safe. And you failed too. If I could trade places with her, I would, James said, his own voice thick with unshed tears. Wishing doesn't change anything, Thornton yelled. There's only one way to settle this. You and me, Mackenzie. Fists, no guns. You win, I ride away. I win, you sign over this ranch. Everything you took from her, you give to me. No, I cried. Done, James said, already taking off his gun belt. The fight was brutal. It wasn't a contest of skill. It was a battle of grief and guilt. They fought in the dust, two broken men trying to beat the pain out of each other. I watched, my heart in my throat, as James's strength began to fade against Thornton's desperate fury. Finally, James landed a blow that sent Thornton sprawling. He got to his knees, spitting blood. "Yield," James gasped. "Not until you pay for Mary," Thornton choked out. "Then you'll die holding on to hate," James said, his chest heaving. "And Mary will have lost both the men she loved." And then something in Jake Thornton broke. The rage dissolved, leaving only a hollow, bottomless grief. "She's gone," he sobbed, kneeling in the dirt. "My little sister is gone, and I couldn't protect her." "Neither could I," James said softly, and he knelt beside the man who had just tried to kill him. I went to them then and put a hand on each of their shoulders. Two men, united not by blood, but by their shared love for a woman they had both lost. As I knelt there in the dust, a sudden chilling thought struck me. "The storm," I said, looking at James. "You said you were in town for supplies, but the Trading Post ledger? I saw it when I was helping Mrs. Henderson with her books. You bought supplies the day before the storm hit." James froze. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw not just grief, but a deep, dark secret. "You weren't in town," I whispered, the terrible truth dawning on me. "Where were you, James?" Thornton looked up, his tear-streaked face hardening with suspicion. "What is she talking about, Mackenzie?" "It's not what you think," James said, his voice strained. But it was Mrs. Novak who delivered the final devastating blow. She stepped onto the porch, the rifle still in her hands, her face a mask of sorrow. "He speaks the truth," she said, her voice heavy. "He was not in town. He was chasing her." "Chasing who?" Thornton demanded. "Mary," Mrs. Novak said, her eyes finding mine. "She was running away." The world stopped. Mary wasn't a victim of the storm. She was a runaway. Fleeing from what? Fleeing from whom? "She found out," Mrs. Novak continued, the words falling like stones into the shocked silence. "She found letters. Letters between Mr. Morrison, the banker, and a man from the Cattle Association. They were planning to ruin your husband, to take this ranch from the very beginning. The loan was a trap." My blood ran cold. The financial crisis, the threats, it was all a deliberate scheme. "She was afraid," Mrs. Novak said, her voice trembling, "afraid of what Morrison would do when he found out she knew. She was riding to the Bannisters' ranch to warn them, to get help. The storm, it came up so fast." "And you," I whispered, looking at James. "You went after her." He finally broke, his face crumbling. "I begged her not to go. I told her we would face Morrison together, but she was terrified. When she rode out, I followed. I lost her tracks in the snow. By the time I found her, it was too late. He hadn't abandoned her. He had been desperately trying to save her. All this time, he hadn't been carrying the guilt of a careless husband. He'd been carrying the guilt of a failed rescuer." Jake Thornton stared at James, the hatred in his eyes slowly being replaced by a horrified understanding. The man he had blamed for his sister's death had been her last, desperate hope. The real villain wasn't James. It was Carl Morrison. "Morrison?" Thornton breathed, the name like a curse. He looked at James, then at me. "All this time, I blamed the wrong man." He got to his feet, his battered body moving with a new, cold purpose. "This isn't over. Not until Morrison pays." The fight was no longer between them. Now they had a common enemy. The next few months were a whirlwind. With Jake Thornton's help and the testimony of his man Will, we started piecing together the full extent of Morrison's conspiracy. The young man, Will, had overheard Morrison bragging about how he'd drive all the small ranchers out and consolidate the land for the big cattle operations. He'd use threats and impossible loans to bleed them dry. I took the evidence we gathered, the letters Mary had found, and my own knowledge of the law from my Boston education, and I drafted a petition to the territorial governor. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. All the while, a new life was growing inside me. I was pregnant. The news brought a fragile joy to our embattled home. It was a symbol of the future, a future we were fighting tooth and nail to protect. James was terrified and overjoyed all at once. He treated me as if I were made of glass, his protective instincts now focused entirely on me and our unborn child. The pressure from Morrison intensified. Fences were cut. Our well was fouled. Shots were fired in the night. It was a war of nerves designed to break us before our petition could ever reach the Capitol. The final confrontation came on a cold December morning. Morrison and a dozen hired guns rode into our yard, but this time we were ready. The Bannisters and a half-dozen other ranchers from our newly formed alliance were waiting, armed and resolute. "This is your last chance, Mackenzie," Morrison snarled. "Sell now or be buried here." "I don't think so, Morrison," a new voice called out. A U.S. Marshal, flanked by soldiers from the fort, rode into the yard. He held up a sheaf of papers. "Carl Morrison, I have a warrant for your arrest. Your conspiracy is over." My petition had worked. Morrison was led away in chains, screaming threats, but his power was broken. A cheer went up from the ranchers. In the midst of the celebration, I grabbed James's arm, a sharp pain radiating through my body. "James," I gasped, "it's time." Our son was born as the first snow of winter began to fall. We named him William, after a brother James had lost long ago. He was perfect, a tiny, fierce symbol of our victory. The mail-order bride who wasn't supposed to last the winter had become a mother. The broken rancher who had lost his first family had found a new one. With Morrison gone, a true peace settled over our valley. James, with his newfound courage and the respect he'd earned, was asked to become the sheriff of the newly formed county. He accepted, determined to build a future where the law protected the small and the weak. A letter finally arrived from my sister Charlotte. My parents had held a memorial for their dead daughter. I was free. My old life was truly gone, a ghost that could no longer haunt me. One perfect spring evening, I sat on the porch with Will sleeping in my arms, watching James ride in on his new horse. The ranch was thriving. Our community was safe. Our family was whole. He sat beside me, his arm wrapping around my shoulders. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly, "leaving everything behind?" I looked at our son, at the man beside me, at the vast, beautiful land that was now my home. I had come here seeking escape, and in the harsh, unforgiving wilderness of Montana, I had found so much more. I had found myself. I had found love. I had found a home. "Never," I said, "not for a moment." He smiled, that slow, rare smile that I had come to cherish. "Good," he said, "because this is just the beginning." He was right. Our story wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real, forged in hardship, tested by fire, and built on the foundation of a love that was strong enough to weather any storm. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey. I hope Eleanor and James's story of survival and love touched your heart. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear from folks all around the world, so please drop a comment below and let me know what country or state you're in. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of courage and romance from the Wild West. And tell me, what was your favorite moment? Did you see the twist about Morrison coming? Share your thoughts in the comments. Until we meet again on the dusty trails, keep riding toward your own sunset. Happy trails, partners.